my testimony when I was here last Thursday, but for those of you that didn't, I'll give you kind of a short version. I was born and raised in Provo, Utah, which is where Brigham Young University is, which is a Mormon university, and probably the most highly concentrated area of Mormons. And when I was 15, my father was killed in an accident, and that's kind of like the pivotal point that I look back into my life and see when I really kind of turned away from Mormonism. And there were several things going on in my mind, but I think probably one of the most predominant things was the fact that we were now kind of shunned in a weird way, which is sad, because my dad, we no longer had a priesthood figure in our house, and that's very big. So if you don't have that priesthood figure, it's just kind of like, oh, you're just not, you're a different kind of family. And I remember one of the first things I thought when my father passed away, when I found out, initially, I just thought, we're not a family anymore. The family unit's broken, kind of like somebody of divorce would think, a child of divorce. So that was pretty hard on me. So I kind of fell away. About 16, 17, I started rebelling and would refuse to go to church. And by the time I was 17, I got pregnant and got married and had Madison, and yes, such a joy, and was still kind of rebellious. And my husband was not Mormon. He had not grown up in any religion, although he had grown up in Utah. And when I was 21, we moved to Louisiana with the military, and he was stationed in Fort Polk, Louisiana. So we moved there, and we decided to divorce after a very difficult time. And so when we divorced, I moved to Dallas because I needed to stay where he could still have visitation tour. So we moved to Dallas, and so Dallas was really where I think God started pursuing. I know He's always pursued me, but that's the time that I can really pinpoint. Growing up in Utah, I knew one Christian, that was it, in the entire time growing up, and she was Mennonite, so she was a little different. She wore the long dresses and didn't watch TV, so it was a peculiar thing to me. But I did kind of think it was interesting. I did ask her a lot of questions. But basically, my first job here, I met a Christian who kind of asked me what Mormons believed. I thought she was interested in converting, because even though I'd left and didn't believe it, I still had that, well, I'll always be a Mormon kind of mentality. And I always thought, one day I'll go back and I'll get married in the temple and have a temple wedding. I would kind of flip-flop back and forth. Oh, no, I don't believe it. No way. But then, just kind of wanting to please my parents. And so through that divorce, I wanted to go get religion or whatever. So I went to that friend that I told you about. She invited me to a Christian church, and I went with her. Her name was Molly. And the first sermon I ever heard in a Christian church was all about throwing away the list of do's and don'ts and really having a relationship with the Lord. And this was something I was just shocked. A relationship with the Lord, I could not believe it. I was like, this is so bizarre and different and strange. And so I was really interested in that, and it felt like something I could do, because I just felt like a miserable failure at the list. I was just never good at keeping that list. So I kind of went back and forth. It took a while. I was still kind of living in rebellion, still wanted to go out with my friends, and I didn't want to have to be accountable for anything. But I still knew in the back of my mind my life, I wasn't living it the way I was supposed to, the way I was designed to. So I got really close to accepting Christ, and I started a Bible study, and then I met a Jewish guy. And so I dropped out of the Bible study, and that was one of the issues that I dealt with, was that after losing my dad, I just really wanted some male in my life to complete me, and so that was one of the struggles that I faced. And so I gave up the Christian thing for a while, put it on the back burner, said I'll get to that later. Well, that relationship failed, and so that was a time where it was pretty devastating to me. So I really started looking at my life, and I joined it was called Celebrate Recovery, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it is a program which is working the 12 steps, and it's for various things that people struggle with: pride, anger, depression, eating disorders. I mean, they just had everybody in there. So that was a place where I really felt like I could share. And step 3, you have to accept Christ. So I had a friend, Becca, who I'd met through Watermark, and that's my church, and she I went to her and I said, I don't know if I've accepted Christ, because I've always grown up hearing these terms, and I've learned about Christ. I know he died on a cross. I mean, this wasn't foreign stuff to me, but I wasn't sure that I had really accepted Christ. And so we prayed there October 9th of 2003, and I accepted the Lord, and that was just a really neat time for me. It definitely took time. My life was still kind of chaotic, but God brought a community into my life, and just slowly I started giving up the old patterns and habits and really started relying on the Lord. And I went through a period where I didn't date for almost a year and a half, because I felt like God was calling me to that, and that was like something totally new for me, because I'd always had that and that was a struggle for me, was to just be alone and be content with God. And so he kind of moved me through that. And one of the other things I didn't share is that I did try to go back to the Mormon church. And I went to church, and this was after I'd been to the Christian church. I went with my mom, and I remember in Sacrament meeting, which is their main meeting, it's like the main meeting, they didn't say anything about Jesus. I don't remember what they talked about, but I just kept thinking, this church said so much about Jesus, and this is supposed to be like the Church of Jesus Christ? I don't understand, And then I went to Relief Societies, where all the women are, and they were talking about how to serve your husband well, which is a great topic, but when you're going through a divorce, you're kind of like, okay, what, does this apply? I'm like, okay, I'm sure maybe one day this will apply to me, but what if it didn't? And so that was just kind of a hard thing to take. And I guess, Mormons are really big on being married, because eternal marriage is the ultimate, marriage is the ultimate. So I'd always idolized this, so it was hard to move away from that. So, and that's basically my story. And then I met Rob through his ministry, because I was trying to share Christ with my family, and I wasn't sure the best way to do that. And so got in contact with him about churches in Utah, and then we eventually started dating. So, and now we're married.
Tell me about John Haroon.
Oh, John Haroon, yes. There's so many people that are just instrumental that God just put in my path, and I could just name, 20 or so people that just really spoke to me. But there was one guy, John Haroon, who told me about the Celebrate Recovery, because I had called him up and was like, oh, I've just gone through this horrible thing, and he was actually in it too. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go check it out. But before this had all happened, right before I started dating the Jewish guy, he confronted me one time on the phone about Mormons aren't Christian, because he was pretty solid Christian, and I just was like, what do you mean? Of course we are. And he said, well, don't you guys believe that Jesus and Satan are brothers? And I said, well, yeah, everybody believes that. And he was like, no, we don't. And I was like, oh, okay, so this was something new. So it took him kind of pointing that out, because I don't know that had I had gone through this Celebrate Recovery, I would have just thought, I'm a Christian, and, so it was really, I kept thinking about that, are Mormons really Christian? And it was funny, once I accepted Christ, I knew that I was different, but I still thought that maybe some Mormons were Christian. I really was hoping, but God just kind of laid it on my heart. The more and more I saw my family and the way they were living their lives, is that they did not have Christ in their life. They did not. And when that became apparent, it really gave me a heart for them, and wanting to, even though, my mom has a very nice life, she's never drank alcohol, never smoked a cigarette, hasn't struggled with major things like that, I really started seeing that, we all struggle, and that's one of the things Mormons kind of hide, is the fact that you struggle. You don't want people to know you struggle, heaven forbid, because if people know you struggle, then you're not keeping up with the list. And so just, and my mom kind of denying that, it made me realize that, she doesn't have Christ, because if you have Christ, you're flawed, and that's okay, but God, wants you to do better. He wants to grow you from that point. But just accepting, I think one of the other problems with Mormons is accepting the fact that they're a sinner. And even when they did the sinner's prayer for me, when my friend prayed it with me, and she said, please forgive Tara of all of her many sins, and I was like, many? I have sins, but not many. I was just kind of like, excuse me. And I didn't really understand grace until like right before I was baptized, which was about a year later. I mean, I truly understood it, really understood that. I guess I understood grace, but I didn't understand the level of my sin and the grace that was needed to cover that. And so when I finally understood that, it was pretty overwhelming. I was like, wow. Because Mormons also believe that, Jesus died on the cross for your sins, but you still have to do the work. As my mom would say, he's the ladder. You have to still climb up the ladder to get to heaven or to get to, So that's basically my story.